Welcome, everyone, and welcome to the podcast of Base End Corporation. Today's episode will be another special episode as we will have it at a vodcast. I am Nhi, Marketing Coordinator at Base End Corporation, and joining me today is our Communication Officer, Sonia Burry. And in today's episode, we will be discussing the themes of connected farm and smart farm. So welcome, Sonia. It's very good to have you here today with us.
Thank you very much, Nhi. I'm excited to discuss with you.
Yes, me too. So let's start first right away with the first questions. Let's build a bit context. So how will you explain smart farm to the listeners?
Yeah, that's actually a very complex topic. So let's try to simplify it a bit. A smart farm or connected farm would be a farm that provides real-time information to farmers, whether this is via sensors or actually like nowadays they also have already small robots that drive around with the camera in like within the crops to record the health status of the crop. So this is like all that is done in really modern farms that are fully connected. And of course, they are still mainly in the pilot phase. But it's quite interesting to see what you can achieve, like how you can reduce the use of any resources, whether this is human resource or water and fertilizer, if you just have enough information available. And I think the biggest problem is that we still, even though we have the technology, we don't yet take really good use of it. So that is what I would call the smart farm, is like literally reducing the amount of labor and resources and increasing the yield.
Right. Is farming familiar to you? Like, is it an area that you are very interested in, or maybe both?
Yes, actually, it is familiar to me because I did grow up in a small village where everyone had an own garden. So it was like very small scale farming, but it was totally natural for me as a kid that we have any vegetables like in our own garden, whether this is potatoes, carrots, salad, like you name it, beans, anything. And of course, also some fruits that grow in the area where I'm from. And also, since I am from a village, there are still bigger farmers. So I have spent a good amount of my childhood either in the own garden, or then when the farmers, like, it's a small place, so people are connected, and then you just go, the whole village went to help with the potato harvest, for example. And yeah, definitely. That's something I have experience in. And I also do practice this a little bit in my city apartment now. So I have a small garden on my balcony. Unfortunately, only enough space to have some herbs and tomatoes, but it's working.
Yeah, that sounds so great. And nowadays, how do you see the statuses of farming? Like how do you, because you seem very interested in this areas. How have you seen the statuses of farmers these days? Has it changed a lot for the last recent years?
Yes, I think it has changed tremendously. First, there was like a big revolution in like in I was about to say in the 90s, but a lot earlier already, when you started to have better equipment. But also, in general, I did realize that smaller farms start to disappear more and more, and they get replaced by very, pardon me, by very large scale farms. And I'm speaking about these kind of farms that, well, I cannot even like name this properly, but they have an insane amount of fields, and they are strongly dependent on what they like specialize in. For example, if you look at the dairy production, this is something that the small farming has disappeared almost completely. So you have those huge dairy farms, but you can't like hardly go in any village and buy milk from a farmer anymore, because most of them found it not profitable anymore, because the big players like literally just cut them off via pricing. So yeah,
Mm,
that's a bit
right.
sad shift.
Yeah, right. And then I know that you did wrote an end blog before titled Old MacDonald Had No Connected Farm. And you wrote that the agriculture industry already underwent a drastic change in the past 50 years. Improved machinery, seeds, fertilizers, and irrigation led to increased cultivation of more land. But the next revolution is already here and can truly change the world. I would like to ask, would you elaborate here with us more what you meant by the next revolution of agriculture?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned in the past, the revolution was literally that the equipment got much better because, for instance, my grandma still was plowing the field herself with a cow or two cows in that case. And if you see the shift, because that might have been in the 1930s, and after that, you saw more and more of the tractors coming up, and the machinery got a lot better. And as you also already mentioned, that I also mentioned in the blog, the fertilization and the irrigation was improved significantly. But yet, even though we have a lot of modern machinery, so like the farmers can plant a lot more, like they can easily have quadruple the size of their usual farm they had before, and yet we are still not using all what we have efficiently. So the next revolution, I would say, is definitely about the smart farming and the connected farm, because regardless of how high tech we have combine harvesters at the moment, they are still not able, not all, some have more features, of course, but there is still a lot of room for improvement to measure, for example, the moisture of a grain directly in the harvester. Now you still have it, you can take it from the field and measure it by hand. So that's something that could be done. And mainly when you look at the future, I do believe that with the quality of communication, like real-time communication being available, so you can have sensors that are easily connected. And it does not even take, because many farms are also in remote locations, but even that problem has been solved a long time ago. So there are sensors, many sensors that can operate with a minimum of network, or even very, doesn't even matter how remote, but they do operate, and they can send you really valuable information. For example, I have lately seen a TEDx talk about the irrigation in very dry land, and that it was handled mainly by experience. And yet every year there was at least one farmer, and they are really dependent for the life, to have enough food. And there was at least one farmer who overwatered in a very dry area. So you would actually not expect it, because the surface is always very dry. But then if you plant the sensors if you put them about 50 centimeter deep, like in this particular case, actually the roots were very wet, even though the surface was completely dry, but the roots were very wet. So that's why there was always at least one farmer who had a bad harvest because they just overwatered it. So that is something that can definitely be improved. And that's also where I see that the future is heading, because with all the sensors we have, and also little robots that go around the fields and inspect the health of the crop. And also one thing that I do believe is in use already, but not in many places, is the drip irrigation, because also studies and research from data analyzers have shown that by using the drip irrigation, you save about 94% of the water that you would usually use. And at the same time, you get a lot healthier crops and more. So you harvest a lot more than before. So it's a lot better than just surface watering. And I do believe with all the technology that's available, it should be very easy for anyone. But so that's definitely the next revolution, to connect your farm and all the machinery. And you can monitor the health status of your crops at any time. Of course, in conjunction with the weather forecast, you can literally make a lot better results, because the population is growing. So we also need to get to speed with growing more food to feed everyone on the planet.
So in a way, you kind of perceive that farming hasn't really maximized the benefits of technology fully yet.
No, not yet, unfortunately. And that was quite surprising because I see all of those great documentaries and follow this privately quite a lot. And also, just by looking at my surroundings, I know that people have, for example, high-tech stables, and yet they are not able to meet the demand. So many farms are closing again, and the same goes for the crops. So I don't know why this happens, but it is certainly an interesting process that you have all of the technology. The only thing that is missing is maybe an integrator who can bring all of these together so that you get like a unified view that is easy to use. I think it's still maybe that, you know, sometimes people are still afraid a bit of the new developments in technology. Like look at self-driving cars. They've been speaking about this for a very, very long time, and yet there is not really a self-driving car. I mean, yes, they exist, they have testing places, but I think there is one currently on the market that is allowed to go on a street. I do believe it's a Mercedes, but I'm not entirely sure. That's not my area of expertise. But yeah, I don't know, because these things are kind of very different. But for the farming, I don't really understand, because all the tools that are needed are already there. You just need to implement and take a leap of faith.
Right. So is this maybe like an extension from that question I was asking? So what other barriers do you see that kind of preventing farming and agriculture to adopt technology, new technologies, or any other digital technologies out there to in real practices?
I actually don't have a question that would fit, don't have an answer that would fit like anyone, but from my experience, like when I speak to people I know who are owning a farm, it's not that they don't trust, it's more that they don't know. So they would maybe just need somebody to take them by the hand and walk them through step by step. And of course, like sometimes you have to make an upfront payment, and with a decrease in like price, for example, for any vegetables, you know, like also, as I mentioned previously, for the dairy products, like the prices, at least in Germany, they have been on a record low. So you could not survive from having a milk cows like only. That was simply not possible. So many gave it up. And I do believe if you just take the time and explain and also show, because that is something that I have experienced. If you are speaking to a very young generation of farmers, like around being in their 30s, that already kind of grew up with the internet, they are not so reluctant. But then again, farming has become unattractive for many generations as well. I do believe I also mentioned that in the blog post, that nowadays, even in the small place I'm from, barely anyone still has a garden, because it's simply cheaper and less labor intensive to go to the supermarket and buy your vegetables. I personally would still grow them in the garden, but that's a personal choice. So I think I don't want to say that per se age would be the problem, but many people have done it for like decades in a certain way. So it's very difficult to convince them, hey, let's try another way. But I'm very sure once you show them all the benefits that they can have, that anyone would like to take that. I mean, you know, if you have to work less and yet get a better yield, I do believe that many would at least want to try it. But yeah.
Right.
I mean, all of the machineries in general, they are like also extremely expensive. So that's also something that is disregarded a lot. So they need to make constant investment to yield bigger fields, and the machines are getting bigger and bigger and more expensive, of course. And yeah, so I think that this might be a generational conflict. But as said, like you can't find an answer for that really, because people are so different. But I do feel that it's mainly Mainly the holdback is that people are not so familiar and are maybe also just a bit afraid to use technology, because if you did it like for 50 years in this way, it's a bit strange then to shift to a completely other way.
Yeah, like change sometimes takes a while to happen, especially when you get used to a certain way of like this is always the way that things has always been done, I suppose.
Yeah, that's true. And change is always for humans, it's always very, very difficult to adapt to. But you know,
Right.
if there's a will for doing this, I'm quite sure there's also a way that they can find to implement the technology.
Mm. Right, and for the farmers who have adopted digital technologies to various extents, because as you said, we can't really know for sure exactly. It varies between individual in between farmers, but for those who have, let's say, already recognized the benefits of technology, adopted it, and what do you see as maybe problems that they still encounter before they can reach the maximum benefits of using technologies?
Yeah, there are indeed quite many who have like the latest machinery, and it's fairly good because they get all the real-time information about, for example, the fuel use of a harvester and the like. But I do believe that still the connectivity is lacking. Like, yes, you have a lot of information you get from your current equipment, and yes, they have all kinds of fancy things that do certainly improve also the yield. But you know, just because something has a lot of buttons and maybe not a steering wheel but a joystick instead nowadays, it does not mean that it increases your efficiency. So I think there should be more of the connecting things all together. As mentioned, I think it would be very beneficial to use like those sensors, and they are really not so cost intensive because there are so many different kind of sensors, and you just, as mentioned, need a platform that brings them all together. And like, you know, you give in all the data and you get an output that's easily understandable, so that things don't happen like in the example I told previously, that you overwater because the surface is dry but the roots are very wet. So I think that's something that, even though if you embrace the new kind of machinery that gives you a certain amount of data already, you should definitely think about connecting everything in your farm, like whether this is your fields via the sensor to measure like the condition of the crops, or the little robot with the camera that goes around your crops and looks for their health, and also implement like you know, in some cases, of course, the vertical farming is a big topic as well. But even if you just look at simple fields, I think there's a lot to improve.
Mm, right. And so actually in the same end block, the title Old MacDonald Has No Connected Farm, you also mentioned the idea of having an entire farm connected, which also just what you mentioned again. How would you describe to the listeners a connected farm? And what would be the first steps for enabling a connected farm? I guess first of all is to have the connectivity.
Exactly. So that is the first thing, that you have the connectivity, and that's easily doable. I think we have also in previous podcasts discussed about how easy it is to set up connectivity, even in the most remote locations you can think about. And once you have that, like it's very easy to just, like as I said, like I'm saying a lot about the sensors because they can be incredibly helpful. But it's of course not only the sensors, also like the status of your machines is very important to know that they don't overheat. Because when I spent some time in the countryside last year, I actually was a witness of a combine harvester overheating, which is kind of unexpected because the fields are not that big. So, you know, it was just an awkward sight, like for me, that a harvester is overheating. Not unfamiliar, of course, but just awkward, because I thought like by now they should be all like having like not connectivity, but have some kind of digitalization, like a digital twin, for example, that would prevent you from kind of getting on fire. but appears that was not even the case. So that was a bit confusing, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Right. And so what are the key things you see that farmers or any other involved stakeholders need to understand first if they are interested in adopting technologies, for example, Internet of Things, to connect the entire farm?
Yeah, that ties a bit to my previous answer that I do believe it is very important to see the benefit, because there are, like always, you can find a lot of barriers to start things. But if you just look at the return on investment you have, because I mean, we have problems with fertilization and with like harmful chemicals like pesticides and everything. So if you have like all the information and the data, this could be, for example, I do believe we at Bayesian actually had a connected beehive already. This also goes down to pollination with bees, you know. So if you get like the whole, like so to say, the whole ecosystem that is around a farm, like including also pollination and everything, then I think yes, it certainly is a change. It's an investment, but you make it for the future, because in the future, like as mentioned, the population is growing and we need to make a lot more effort to feed all the people on the planet, because there are way too many people that still go to bed hungry, and that's not okay, because we do have the resources to make this happen if we use them more efficiently and more sustainable. And I believe if you create a digital twin of your farm and you can see all the input, like whether this is from the pollination to the fertilization and irrigation, like as mentioned, the drip watering saves a lot of water and also prevents like overwatering. So if you have all of this, then I think it should be a no-brainer to say like, please come and help me. And there's always companies like Bayesian, for example, like if someone is approaching us, I'm quite sure we can help them to get connected in any way. Like there's not something like there is no rocket science behind this. It's just about making things happen.
Right, yes, absolutely. So let's, as the final note for our podcast episode today, well, what is the one thing you would like to leave to our listeners before we close the episode? One key takeaway.
To think outside the box and to think to see digitalization as your friend. I do believe it comes across sometimes difficult, and mankind is not so prone to changes, and it is very difficult to stay on top of everything, like whether this is applications on your phone or a connected farm. It's new for all of us, like it's a revolution. But as we have seen in the past, the last revolution was very beneficial to the humankind, and so will the next one be, because we need to be a bit very careful, actually not a bit, very careful with our resources. Like the problem of running out of water is very real, so we should like literally all do our best efforts not to live wastefully. And I would encourage everyone to take good care of the planet, because we just have this one planet we live on at the moment. So I think if everybody is more like, I would just like that people think about a sustainable way of living and also integrate that into their farming or consumer habits. Because of course, if you have the super farms where they need to use a lot of pesticides, again, because they don't have the data available how to prevent this, because actually a study from Israel shows that if you plant a mushroom, a certain kind of mushroom next to a plant, they kind of work like an ecosystem together. So the plant gets a lot stronger, and you don't need any pesticides, because like the insects or other grasses just don't come in between. So they are feeding each other, and that's also something for those mega farms that they could think of, instead of spraying like fertilizer and pesticides all over the place to avoid losing like a massive yield. So that's something I would encourage everyone to think about. And as mentioned, if you have all the data available, that should be quite easy to do.
Absolutely. And wow, thank you for all of the great insights. I have learned a lot today. And thank you, Sonia, for joining us today and share with us all of your insights and how you're very interested and passionate talking about farming and smart farming and connected farm.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was great. And that's a topic that's truly close to my heart. So
Yes. So thank you so much. Maybe see you in the in the other next episode.
yes, and for all our listeners, subscribe.
Yes. Bye bye.